There was a war on, and I was young, and you knew that the young go to the war, and the sooner you get into the army, and you'll get a head start on those who came later. And it was very true, you did. When Czechoslovakia and all that nonsense came and Chamberlain went over, everyone knew there was going to be a war, and I think that this would be 1938 or something. And they had a recruiting drive for the Army Reserve, and I went down to the drill hall, down the hill from Adelaide to the drill hall, and went to Enlistment. I went up the right-hand staircase and in there, and they said, I came to enlist. Mind you, I'm taller and heavier than I am now. And he said, how old are you, son? And I said, I'm 17. In fact, I was only 16. I said I was 16. And he said, oh, go home to your mum and come back when you're 18. Like, goodbye. So the Czech that I went down the stairs, and that was one unit on that side. And I stood on the steps there at the entrance to the drill hall. I thought a lot of rude things, saying what they could do, and I went up the other stairs and knocked on the door and said, I've come to enlist. How old are you? And I said, I'm 19. And the agent said, what's going on there? He was behind somewhere in an office, and this was the sergeant. And he said, well, I could hear what he was saying. There's a young guy want to enlist. He said, oh, that's good. He said, I can see since the great boy, he's a big boy. And he said, yes. He said, how old is he? He says he's 19, but if he's 19, I'm the something Duke of York. And the agent said, well, they're big enough, enlist the boy. And so I was enlisted there, and I worked very hard. And before war was declared, I was sitting for what we call first appointment, that is to become an officer. Because we worked every weekend, we worked with this group they had to get through. And then, of course, they had to produce a birth certificate to get a commission. And, then I had to go and confess and say they made me a sergeant major and said, on your 18th birthday, we can't commission you till you're 18. And on just the day after Anzac Day in 19, whatever it was, I became the youngest officer in the Australian Army because they've been waiting to push it through. He was the epitome of a soldier. He was schoolmaster, deputy head of St. Peter's College, and he was just the epitome of everything that I thought an officer should be, and nothing ever changed. And then seeing him under the shower, was like a colander. He had bullet wounds everywhere, healed up. One on the side of it, you'd think it was a dimple. And I can remember one day on parade, I was his adjutant in the end. And one day on parade, he saw them off and he used to stand erect and he used to hold his stick like this there, and his eyes, blue-eyed, flashing around, never missed a thing. Marched off, up the 2 steps. I followed him in and he was flat on his back out to it. He had just made himself, while everyone could see him, the self-discipline of the man. He was then very sick and I went off to the war part, but he was never was planning to go to the war. He was far too old, but you couldn't have a better role model. And the picture of him is a very good picture of him. You could only describe it as a bugger's muddle. No, there's no other way of describing it. No one was ready for anything. And what happened afterwards, troops finished up one by one down in Melbourne, and they were arrested as deserters, but all of them who hadn't seen each other had the same story, that the word went round, this is the end, each man for himself. And they got their way down to Adelaide, and some of them to Melbourne, until they realised, but they hushed it up very much. But the setup up there was quite hopeless. We went up Darwin, we were out from on the rivers. The commando unit went out on the Roper River, the Victoria River and the Daly River, because there was an infiltration of some Japanese around there we were hunting for, but didn't find any, but they had been there. But not in hundreds, in twos and threes. But the least said about the Darwin's setup, somebody obviously must have said something, but I can remember a plane taking them out, and it was like a DC-3 or something like that, and people on it, and they just couldn't get any case. It landed in Catherine to get more fuel, and of course more people jumped on, and it just couldn't take off and collapsed into the fence at the end of the runway and tipped up on its side, and sort of everything, ambulances and godless came out, and they were counting the people on the plane. And in any case, one guy was missing, and somebody said, look, he was full as a tick, and he went down to the loo when we're still on the ground, I remember. So they looked for the bit that's got the back loo at the back of the DC-10, and they opened the door, and he said, aren't we in Alice Springs yet? And that was the sort of atmosphere it was. That was the first reports they had in Melbourne about what the 2nd 4th Company was doing. And I said I should get back somehow or other and get back to my unit, because you're very proud of your position. You know, I was there, I was carted off with osteomyelitis, which in those days before the penicillin drugs was quite serious. But for them to be over there and me not to be with them was almost a disgrace. You know, there was a moral thing about it. My troops, who I trained, were over behind the enemy line. Their officer was lying in bed, enjoying life and going to the Melbourne Cup to watch colonists win in 1942. And in any case, they said, well, that is very good. They want some more signallers up there and they want this. You'll take them back with you, and they're short of 2 more officers. And there were 60 of them, and they were ratbags. They were not properly trained, and to put them at that stage behind the enemy lines where you need first-class discipline. And I got up there. I only met them on the railway station in Adelaide as they were going through up by train up to towards Alice Springs and then by road. And then they suddenly said they want me up there when we got them up to Adelaide River, I went forward and reported to General Stevens, who was the commander of that area, and said, I cannot take these troops overseas. That they are not ready for it. Actually, I wasn't very fit myself. I'd been in hospital when I wasn't fighting fit yet, but that didn't worry me. I knew I'd get fit. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, my orders are, I said, well, I would like it recorded. There was a fellow with him. I said, that it is wrong. He said, I arrived and I said, we'll have a chat in the morning about it. In any case, Lipman, bye-bye, goodbye. So next morning I arrived, and he said, well, what are you going to do with these troops? And I said, well, sir, I would like to march them with all their gear from Adelaide River to Darwin. And I said, if they can get up there and keep up, and I'm only just recently out of hospital, if they've got there at least, we'll see what they're like. And 24 of them arrived with me, and I think the others are still up walking. I don't know whatever happened to them afterwards. And those 24 were fit, and it really did pick the eyes out of them, and some of them were very good soldiers. So that is the story of, they call it, they now, I get letters from these old men, the death march you took us on from Adelaide River to Darwin and things like that. And Stevens, that's very good. No, that was, when did you think of that? And I said, well, if you want to know, I didn't get much sleep worrying stuff about it. It's all very well in advance, but in retrospect, and I said, what my CO would see if I arrived with those people were, and we had 4 days in Adelaide River, and they worked them hard and tried there, but they were really good people. The rat bags, as I said, I don't know what happened to them. I was on a Dutch ship called the Jiddick Hiddies. We got on it in Darwin. It was, when I say a bit scary, 2 ships came and were both sunk before they got to Darwin. This was at the low ebb. Japan has now taken over the lot everywhere at the beginning of 42, or no, at the end of 41, beginning of 42, when they came in December, at the very beginning of 42. And this Dutch ship, Dutch destroyer, and that was, it's not such a long trip, it's only about a 12-hour trip, because they scuttle along, get you and unload you, and off they go quickly. And then they offload you offshore and you go to the shore. If you've got time and the sea is all right, and they can rescue their boats back, but otherwise that would be in rubber craft, that you would do it, and you'd have to bury those when you leave no sign of them there. So that was quite uneventful, and we had an exchange of lights and got there, and the welcome party, if to call it, was on the beach, and we headed off up to the hill where we were, at a place called Batano. It was a bit of a culture shock. And then we had this group of about 120 of them, Japanese, came down, and see, we were not there to kill them outright. For instance, if we could put in on the northern side a roadblock and machine gun down and get rid of 90 vehicles because there was a cliff next door, and the chances are they'd fall over off the cliff with their cars, and the build-up of it, that was worthwhile, and then we'd be gone. But to just do that, there would be, even if we killed 2/3 of them and lost 10 of our own, that wouldn't have been a good bargain.
Mm-hmm.
So that this won't come in. The thing was just to lie down in the long grass and make out we weren't there. They owned the whole place, and we were the only there. I think there were 204 of us there, and so that our main aim was to get information back of what they were doing all the time, and harass them. For instance, if we could get and put a big bomb under their ammunition, the magazine where they hold all the supplies and bombs and mines and things like that. If you could get in and blow one of those up, that was really good. And they're the sort of things that we would do, but we weren't out on a killing mission. If you got three people by themselves going out on a reconnaissance, and there would be no sign at all of where you'd been and what you'd been, well, they would, because you had to be careful, because they would torture local people for knowledge, do you see? And we didn't want to, we loved those Timors so much that we were certainly not sacrificing them. Although they're not highly intelligent people, very loyal, but not fighting at all, absolutely dead frightened of fighting, they'd disappear. But they'd come back. Now they're there, now they're gone. And these were kids from 12 years old upwards. Some of them only 11, but hard in the right place, and very loyal and wonderful. Sometimes we lived in their huts with them, and of course we had food and things that we'd go out and get, and we also paid them in silver. We had a lot of the 2 shilling pieces worth of silver in those days, and we would pay them, and that was all very good currency for them. But it was a very difficult situation there, which you made the most of. As we got through, we all had malaria, and when it came on, your temperature goes up to billy-o, and you get to Joe Blake's, and we ran out of quinine, which there, and then, because none of the water's purified, no one told us about this, we all had dysentery. Some of us were lucky enough to have both bacillary dysentery and amoebic dysentery. I never got rid of that till about 1948, because penicillin only came in about 1944. And that did get rid of that. And we didn't get malaria. We didn't get rid of malaria until well after the war. We'd get malarial attacks. But then they had plasma quinine, new drugs that came through, and we eventually got them with Brazil. I can remember, I think my last attack was in 1950. There was no real roads up between Weston, where we landed, and Beaufort, going north to Papa Jesselton, up that side. Remember that 24 Brigade were on the western side, that is 9 Div, that part, and the other part of 9 Div was on Balikpapan on the other side, so I only know about the Labuan side there. And where our artillery fire and things, there were a lot of broken down vehicles, trucks, which they had wheels and no rubber tyres on, all that. And if we put those on a Jeep, we could adjust it on the railway line, and if we put ballast in the Jeep and put chocks under the springs, you could get more weight. And we had flat tops, and you could put a gun on a flat top, and some of the crew, it was amazing, 2 Jeeps lashed together could pull. And so my job was to set up a railway system. And setting up a railway system, first of all, you've got what we call the Perway, that is the railway line, the permanent way itself. And where you get torrential rains, you've got to have groups of people, big groups of people, to build up the ballast underneath where they go to keep it going. Then again, sometimes you get a washaway and you see the railway line dangling with the sleepers underneath it 9 feet before the first, and you've got all of that. And we got all of the locals with steel helmets as they start getting the stuff and building up the railway line. And then you have it's a single line with passing and the discipline, and you've got to learn from square one where you have it, what they call the tablet system. If I'm going, there's only one tablet, you see, and you put your hand in a place where they keep the tablet, which is a hunk of wood, with it, and then you go down, and that no one, they wait the other side of that thing till you come down. But then in emergencies and think, oh, there's not another train coming down now, we'll be safe. And of course that you did head on. You had to learn, and then how important the discipline was of keeping it away, the maintenance, and then finding a quarry that we can get some of our bulldozers to break down to get aggregate to go under the railway line. And then the pressure of the brakes and things, you've got to replace the shoes inside the thing of steel to stop it wearing through there, because, and then every night you had teams in the engineering workshop that knew wheels for the back daily. So it became quite a thing. But it worked, and it was the only way they moved forward. And I think they gave a bit of account of it. I think I put a cutting from the newspaper at the time of how the advance was going. Incredible education. 8 men to a tent, smaller than this room, a 12 by 14 tent. 8 men to it, feet to feet, there, 4 across. There, living there permanently. They talk till 2 o'clock in the morning. All what they talk about, they're listening. You can't help learning a lot. The good guys and the sensible guys do educate the others. Someone would take them aside and say, look, we're all in this together. We like having you there. Whether we like it or not, we've got you. We want you to have fun. Yeah, but for God's sake, don't interrupt everybody when they start talking, or for God's sake, try and when you eat an orange at night, don't go slush with it, because it's dry. Go outside and do it if it's annoying the others. And please, we've got to be here. Let's make it. And what the older guys would do that. And then you'd get the sort of the philosophy, this guy going down to get married, and one of them, and they're old, I remember Tom Law said to him, I'll tell you one thing, if every time you have one, the first year you're married, you put a pea in the bottle, for the rest of your life you'll never empty the bottle, just remember that. I mean, this is the sort of roughshod philosophy that you learn from people, and I still remember so much of the conversation of these other guys. And in the end, also learning to keep your mouth shut at the time. I can remember once I answered the phone in the mess, and this woman said, is Brigadier something there? And he'd gone to see his girlfriend in Tabuk, down from Timor. He said, I said, I think he's going, do you know he's gone? I said, I think he's gone to Tabuk or somewhere. It's major looking at me like that, and as soon as I hung up, outside, because you can't talk about this and that. I can tell you, young man, if somebody wants the Brigadier, he is not in, and if say where he's gone, that I could not be said. Now say that after me. Now, would you remember that will be the last thing you do? I'm not telling anybody anything about today's thing, but you are never going to. And what do you say? The Brigadier is not in, and that he's gone, I can't be said. I mean, those sort of things, those rules stick in your bloody mind like bloody